Ambassador David Morrison took his first steps onto the shining metal floor of the biggest spaceship he had ever seen. The ship belonged to the Galactic Confederation, and it was massive beyond anything Earth had ever built. David kept his face calm and friendly, just like he had practiced 1,000 times back on Earth. His smile was warm but not too eager, and he walked slowly to show respect. The alien creatures standing before him were unlike anything from Earth's wildest dreams. The Vorthan Prime Minister stood nearly 10 feet tall, with 4 arms and a face that looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a lobster. When the creature made clicking sound with its mouth parts, David knew it meant approval. He had studied their body language for months. David gave a deep, respectful bow, the kind that showed he understood he was a newcomer here. "We come seeking only peaceful coexistence," he said, keeping his voice gentle and quiet. He had learned that many alien species found loud voices threatening. Earth would be honored to accept even the smallest world within your great confederation. The translation devices buzzed and hummed as his words were converted into dozens of alien languages. Around the huge meeting room, representatives from hundreds of different worlds listened carefully. Some looked like giant insects, others like walking trees, and a few resembled creatures from Earth's deepest oceans. But they all had one thing in common. They looked relieved. Captain Lisa Thompson stood beside David, perfectly still and quiet. She wore a simple blue uniform with no weapons visible anywhere. Her hands were clasped behind her back in a position that showed respect and submission. To the aliens looking at her, she seemed like nothing more than a polite assistant. Maybe someone who carried David's bags or took notes during meetings. The Confederation delegates whisper among themselves in their various languages. David caught fragments through his earpiece, words like peaceful, reasonable, and finally. These aliens had dealt with aggressive species before, races that demanded the best planets, the richest resources, or special treatment. Humans were asking for almost nothing. The Kalari representative, a being that looked like a walking crystal formation, spoke in musical tones that sounded like wind chimes. "Your species shows wisdom beyond your years." The translation came through. Many newcomers demand prime worlds, vast territories, immediate trade privileges. You ask only for a place to exist. David nodded humbly. "We understand that trust must be earned, not demanded. We hope that over time, through our actions, we might prove worthy of greater friendship with your magnificent civilizations." More approving sounds filled the room. The Nexari delegate, resembling a giant blue octopus, gestured with several tentacles. "Your military representative carries no weapons. This shows remarkable faith in our peaceful intentions." Lisa smiled politely when attention turned to her. "We believe that diplomacy should lead, and military force should only exist as a last resort for protection," she said in a voice barely above a whisper. Her words were carefully chosen to sound defensive rather than aggressive. Behind closed doors, the alien leaders discussed humanity's request. The conversation was brief and unanimous. Here was a species that seemed to understand their place in the galaxy's hierarchy. They asked for little, showed proper respect, and appeared to have no military ambitions beyond basic self-defense. Within just 6 hours of first contact, the decision was made. Humanity would receive Haven 7, a small agricultural world on the outer rim of Confederation space. The planet was barely suitable for most known life forms. Its air was thin, its soil poor, and its weather unpredictable. But it was inhabitable with effort, and it was far enough away that even if humans caused problems, they would be isolated. David accepted the offer with genuine gratitude that impressed even the most suspicious delegates. "We are deeply honored by your generosity," he said. "Haven 7 will become a testament to human appreciation for Confederation kindness." As the human delegation prepared to leave, the alien leaders felt a collective sense of satisfaction. Finally, they had encountered a species that understood diplomacy, respected authority, and seemed content with modest beginnings. The galaxy's delicate balance of power would remain undisturbed. Nobody noticed Lisa Thompson's eyes quietly cataloging every security measure, weapon system, and defensive position on the massive flagship. Nobody realized that David Morrison's humble questions about Confederation structure were actually intelligence gathering. And nobody suspected that humanity's greatest strength was making others underestimate them completely. The humans departed peacefully, leaving behind aliens who believed they had just welcomed the galaxy's most harmless species into their midst. 20 years slipped by like a gentle breeze across the galaxy. In that time, humans had become as common a sight as any other species at spaceports and trading stations. Nobody paid them much attention anymore. They were just part of the background, friendly faces who always paid their bills on time and never caused trouble. Robert Hayes had become something of a legend among traders. His cargo ships, painted in cheerful Earth colors, could be found at virtually every major port in Confederation space. He carried everything from rare minerals to exotic foods, always with a smile and a fair price. Port authorities loved him because his paperwork was always perfect, his cargo always exactly what he claimed it to be. What they didn't know was that Robert's trade routes weren't random. Every path he traveled had been carefully planned by minds back on Earth who thought in terms of supply lines and strategic positions. His friendly cargo ships were mapping hyperspace lanes, recording jump points, and noting which systems had valuable resources that might be needed someday. When Robert asked casual questions about local politics or recent pirate activity, dock workers assumed he was just making small talk. Dr. Jennifer Blake had earned a reputation as one of the galaxy's most dedicated researchers. The tall, red-haired scientist could be found on different worlds throughout the year, always with her collection of scanning equipment and data tablets. Alien species welcomed her visits because she showed such genuine fascination with their biology and culture. She would spend months at a time living among the Zephyrians, studying their wing structures or documenting how the rock-like granite people reproduced. Her research papers were published in prestigious scientific journals across the galaxy. Other scientists praised her thorough work and attention to detail. What they admired most was how she always asked permission before studying anything, how she respected local customs, and how she shared her findings openly with the species she studied. But Jennifer's real expertise wasn't in biology. It was in weaknesses. Every scan she took, every biological sample she analyzed, every cultural practice she documented was being fed back to Earth's military strategists. When she studied Zephyrian wing muscles, she was learning how to ground them in battle. When she documented granite people reproduction cycles, she was mapping their population centers and breeding grounds. Ambassador Lisa Turner had become the most popular human diplomat in Confederation history. Her cultural exchange programs were so successful that alien governments actually competed to host human students. Lisa had a gift for making every species feel special and understood. She would spend hours learning about their art, their music, their family traditions. The young humans she sent out as exchange students were equally beloved. They were curious, respectful, and eager to learn. They lived in alien homes, ate alien food, learned alien languages, and participated in local festivals. Their host families often grew so attached to them that saying goodbye was painful. But these weren't ordinary students. Each one had been carefully selected and trained for their mission. When Danny Cooper spent a year with the Vorton family, he wasn't just learning their language, he was studying their military hierarchy and command structures. When Susan Park lived among the aquatic tidal folk, she was mapping their underwater cities and defense networks. They asked innocent questions that any curious young person might ask, but the answers were being compiled into detailed intelligence reports. Thomas Mitchell had become legendary among agricultural specialists throughout the galaxy. The friendly farmer from Earth had revolutionized food production on dozens of worlds by sharing human farming techniques. He spent 2 full years on the crystal world of Calari, working alongside their best farmers to improve crop yields. Thomas was genuinely enthusiastic about farming, which made his cover perfect. He would wake up before dawn to tend crops, stay late to monitor soil conditions, and spend hours discussing irrigation techniques with local farmers. His excitement about discovering new growing methods was completely authentic. But while Thomas talked about soil composition and weather patterns, he was also taking note of much more important details. How many people lived in each farming community, where the food distribution centers were located, which transportation networks moved crops to the cities, how quickly the Calari could mobilize their population if needed. His innocent questions about local infrastructure and emergency procedures seemed perfectly natural coming from someone concerned about protecting valuable crops. all across the galaxy. Humans had woven themselves into the fabric of daily life so naturally that other species had forgotten they were newcomers. They were helpful neighbors, curious researchers, and reliable trading partners. Nobody suspected that behind every friendly smile and innocent question was a species quietly preparing for possibilities that no one else could imagine. The attack came on a Tuesday morning, Earth time. Admiral Corvus of the Drachmer Horde had been planning this invasion for 3 years, studying what he believed were the weakest targets in the galaxy. Humans had spread across dozens of worlds by now, but they still seemed like the same peaceful farmers and traders they had always been. The Drachmer fleet was a terrifying sight. Over 2,000 warships of various sizes, from massive dreadnoughts that could crack planets to swift fighters designed for hunting down fleeing civilians. They had painted their hulls black with red markings, and their ships looked like mechanical vultures descending from space. Admiral Corvus opened communication channels to all human worlds simultaneously. His ugly, scarred face appeared on screens across human space, his yellow eyes gleaming with anticipated victory. "Attention, humans," he growled in his harsh voice. "I am Admiral Corvus of the Drachmer Horde. Your species has grown soft with peace and prosperity. We will take your worlds, your resources, and your people. You have 1 solar day to surrender completely, or we will demonstrate why the galaxy fears the Drachmer name." The transmission cut off, leaving human colonies in apparent panic. Emergency broadcasts went out calling for evacuation ships. Civilian transports began launching from major cities, packed with frightened families. To Drachmer scouts watching from a distance, it looked exactly like what they expected. A weak species preparing to run. But something else was happening. Something the Drachmer couldn't see. On Haven 7, the world humans had called home for 20 years, Captain Lisa Walsh received a priority message that contained just 2 words: Protocol 7. Lisa had been waiting for this moment for 2 decades. She was no longer the quiet military attaché who had stood beside Ambassador Morrison during first contact. Now she wore the uniform of an admiral, and her eyes held the cold calculation of someone who had spent years preparing for war. "All stations, this is Admiral Walsh." She broadcast on encrypted channels that the Drachmer didn't even know existed. "Protocol 7 is now active. Execute immediately." Across human space, the transformation began. On the agricultural world of New Kansas, massive grain silos that fed the local population for 15 years suddenly split open along hidden seams. Inside weren't stored crops, but rows of intercontinental ballistic missiles, their nuclear warheads gleaming in the artificial light. Farmers who had spent years tending crops moved with military precision to launch positions they had memorized long ago. Mining stations throughout the asteroid belts received the signal and began their own transformations. What the galaxy had assumed were simple resource extraction facilities suddenly deployed fighter squadrons that had been hidden in excavated caverns. Pilots who had supposedly spent years learning to operate mining equipment revealed their true training as combat aces. Research outposts that had peacefully studied distant stars for decades activated sensor arrays with military-grade precision. Their scientific equipment had actually been scanning Drachmer fleet movements for months, tracking every ship, recording every communication frequency, mapping every weakness in their formation. Dr. Jennifer Blake, now revealed as Colonel Blake, was working frantically in a laboratory that officially didn't exist. Her 20 years of biological research had given her detailed knowledge of Drachmer physiology. She had samples of their blood, understanding of their immune systems, and most importantly, she knew exactly how their environmental suits recycled air. The bioweapon she released wasn't designed to kill. It was designed to make their life support systems fail slowly, forcing them to retreat or suffocate. But the most devastating revelation came from someone the Drachmer had trusted completely. James Parker had spent 5 years as a cultural attaché living among the Drachmer, supposedly learning their art and customs. He had attended their military ceremonies, befriended their officers, and even dated the admiral's daughter. The Drachmer had grown fond of the curious human, who seemed so impressed by their warrior culture. Now James was transmitting everything: fleet positions, shield frequencies, command codes, and the locations of ammunition storage. Every secret the Drachma military possessed was being broadcast to human forces in real time. The invasion fleet found themselves fighting an enemy that knew their every move before they made it. The battle lasted exactly 6 hours and 17 minutes. Admiral Corvus watched in horror as his mighty fleet was systematically destroyed by an enemy that shouldn't have existed. His ships, designed to intimidate primitive civilizations, were being torn apart by weapons that emerged from farms and mining operations. His carefully planned invasion became a rout as human forces demonstrated tactical superiority that nobody had suspected. In his final transmission before his flagship exploded, Admiral Corvus managed to send one message to Drachma High Command. The humans, they were never what we thought they were. The news of the Drachma defeat spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within hours, emergency meetings were being called on every major world. Government leaders who had gone to sleep thinking they understood the balance of power in the galaxy woke up to discover that everything had changed overnight. The Vorthan Prime Minister, the same towering insect-like being who had welcomed humanity 20 years ago, stood before his emergency council with his mandibles clicking frantically. "Show me the recordings again," he demanded. His advisors played the battle footage once more, grain silos opening like mechanical flowers to reveal missile batteries, mining stations launching military fighters, peaceful research posts coordinating attacks with surgical precision. "How?" was all he could manage to say. Similar scenes were playing out across hundreds of worlds. The crystal-like Kalari leadership gathered in their singing halls, their melodic voices now discordant with confusion and fear. The aquatic tidal folk held emergency assemblies in their deepest cities, their bioluminescent communication patterns flashing rapidly as they tried to process what they had learned. But the most shocking revelations were still coming to light. Intelligence agencies throughout the galaxy began pulling files on every human they had ever encountered, and the picture that emerged was terrifying in its completeness. Robert Hayes, the friendly merchant everyone loved, had never been just a trader. His cargo ships hadn't been carrying random goods. They had been establishing supply lines that connected hidden weapons depots across the galaxy. Every route he had traveled, every port he had visited, every friendship he had made had been part of a vast logistics network that could support military operations anywhere in known space. The Nexary Trade Commissioner, a blue octopus-like being who had known Robert for 15 years, stared at his file in disbelief. "He asked me about our shipping schedules," the commissioner whispered to his staff. "He wanted to know about our cargo inspection procedures. He said it was to avoid delays." The commissioner's tentacles drooped as he realized the truth. He was learning how to move weapons through our space without being detected. Dr. Margaret Stevens had been even more thorough in her deception. The quiet scientist had spent 15 years traveling from world to world, supposedly studying comparative technology and culture. Alien universities had welcomed her, giving her access to their most advanced laboratories and research facilities. She had published papers, attended conferences, and collaborated with the brightest minds in the galaxy. But now they understood what she had really been doing. Every technological advancement she had studied, every industrial process she had observed, every defense system she had been shown had been cataloged and analyzed for weaknesses. She hadn't been learning how their technology worked. She had been learning how to break it. The Granite People's chief scientist, a being whose rock-like exterior hid a brilliant mind, reviewed Dr. Stevens' published research with growing horror. She knew exactly how our shield generators functioned. He reported to his government. Her suggestions for improvements weren't helpful advice. They were ways to create backdoors that could be exploited later. Ambassador David Morrison's true nature was perhaps the most disturbing revelation of all. His gentle questions during those early diplomatic meetings hadn't been simple curiosity about alien cultures. Every inquiry about how different species thought, how they made decisions, what they feared, and what motivated them had been psychological warfare assessments. The Confederation's top psychologist, Dr. ZYN of the telepathic Mindari species, felt physically sick as she realized the implications. "He mapped our entire psychological profile," she told the emergency assembly. "Not just individuals, but entire species. He knew exactly what would make us trust him, what would make us underestimate his people, and what would paralyze us with fear if the time came." But the deepest betrayal came from those the aliens had trusted most. General Michael Roberts had spent 12 years as a mining engineer on the asteroid world of Series 9. The local population had grown fond of the hard-working human who seemed so dedicated to helping them extract valuable minerals from their harsh environment. The Series 9 Mining Council chief, a tough woman named Administrator Kane, felt like she had been stabbed in the heart. "Michael ate dinner at my table every week for 12 years, she said, her voice shaking. "He helped my daughter with her engineering homework. He was at my retirement party." She paused, staring at the intelligence report. "And all that time, he was surveying our defenses, mapping our tunnels, and planning how to use our own mining equipment against us if necessary." The scope of humanity's preparation was staggering. They had spent 2 decades carefully placing their people in positions where they could gather intelligence, build infrastructure, and prepare for conflicts that no one else had even imagined possible. Every human friendship had been strategic. Every act of helpfulness had served a military purpose. Every display of peaceful intentions had been cover for the most sophisticated intelligence operation in galactic history. The galaxy's leaders faced an uncomfortable truth. The species they had welcomed as harmless diplomats were actually the most dangerous predators any of them had ever encountered. The great assembly hall of the Galactic Confederation had never been so quiet. Representatives from hundreds of worlds sat in stunned silence as Ambassador David Morrison walked to the central podium one final time. But this wasn't the same humble human who had first asked for a small agricultural world 20 years ago. This man moved with quiet confidence, and behind him stood a group of humans that the galaxy was seeing clearly for the first time. Admiral Lisa Walsh wore her military uniform openly now, her medals and rank insignia gleaming under the chamber's lights. Dr. Jennifer Blake stood beside her, no longer pretending to be just a curious scientist. Colonel James Parker was there too, the man who had lived among the Drachmer and learned their deepest secrets. Dozens of other humans filled the space behind Morrison, each one shedding the peaceful covers they had worn for decades. Morrison's smile was the same gentle expression that had charmed alien diplomats for 20 years. But now everyone understood what that smile really meant. He looked out at the sea of alien faces, some fearful, some angry, some simply confused, and began to speak in the same soft, reassuring voice they all remembered. "My friends," he said, and even now his tone carried warmth and respect. "I want you to understand something very important. We never lied to you. Not once in 20 years did a human representative tell you something that was untrue." A ripple of disbelief moved through the chamber. The Vorthan Prime Minister's mandibles clicked in agitation. "You deceived us completely," he accused. "Your merchants were spies. Your scientists were gathering intelligence. Your diplomats were planning for war." Morrison nodded peacefully. "Yes, they were. But we also genuinely sought peace with you. We truly did want to protect trade and learn about your cultures. We simply understood something that you didn't. The greatest predators in nature are those that their prey never recognize as dangerous until it's too late." The hall erupted in angry voices from dozens of species, but Morrison continued calmly. "We studied your histories. We learned about the wars that devastated your worlds, the conflicts that killed billions of your people. We saw civilizations that had grown tired of fighting, that wanted nothing more than peace and prosperity. And we realized that someone needed to protect that peace." Colonel Parker stepped forward, carrying a data pad that projected holographic images above the assembly. "Over the past 20 years, humanity has identified and eliminated 17 major threats to galactic stability," he said. "Threats that your intelligence services never detected." The first image showed a spreading red mass across a star chart. "The Veltar Plague," Parker explained. "A biological weapon that escaped from an abandoned research facility 3 years ago. It would have consumed all organic life in this sector within 5 years. Human agents contained and neutralized it before it could spread beyond the initial system." The next image showed mechanical structures that looked like crystalline spiders. "The Nightmare AI Uprising on the ghost world of Terminus 4. An artificial intelligence that had been building robot armies for 50 years, preparing to launch attacks on inhabited worlds. We shut it down permanently." More images followed. Void creatures that devoured starships, rogue military units planning coups, terrorists developing planet killer weapons. Each threat had been real, deadly, and completely unknown to Confederation security forces. But you eliminated these threats without telling us, protested Dr. Zywyan of the Mindari. You made decisions about galactic security without consulting anyone. Morrison's expression grew slightly sad. Would you have believed us? If humans had come to you 3 years ago claiming that a plague was spreading the Outer Rim, would you have trusted our intelligence? Or would you have wondered what we were really planning? The uncomfortable silence that followed was answer enough. Admiral Walsh stepped forward now, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded fleets in battles the galaxy never knew were fought. The truth is, most of you are too civilized for the universe we live in, she said. Your species have evolved beyond the need for constant warfare. You've created beautiful societies focused on art, science, and peaceful cooperation. That's something precious that deserves protection. But someone has to watch the monsters in the dark, Morrison added gently. Someone has to be willing to make the hard choices, fight the ugly battles, and carry the burden of keeping everyone else safe. We decided that someone would be us. The Kalari representative, her crystal body chiming softly, asked the question everyone was thinking. What happens now? Do you rule over us? Do you demand tribute? Do you control our governments? Morrison's smile returned, genuine and warm. We continue exactly as we have for 20 years. We remain your trading partners, your researchers, your diplomats, and your friends. But now you understand why we're so good at keeping the peace. He paused, looking around the chamber at faces that were beginning to show understanding rather than fear. Conquest is inefficient. Ruling through fear is exhausting. It's much better to be the friendly neighbor that everyone trusts, the helpful ally that everyone welcomes, the protector that nobody realizes they need until the danger is already gone. Morrison's final words hung in the air like a gentle threat and a warm promise combined. We remain your diplomats, your partners, your protectors. But now you understand why predators smile. The galaxy had found its guardians, and the guardians were smiling.